what's there. So again, you should subscribe to this channel because we're posting the videos for each class there. And you know that you have Khan Academy quiz today, and we will have other in-class quizzes in general. And one thing I added was the PowerPoints for our class are now available at WebAssign down here on the lower left-hand side. So you can download those if you want. Okay, and they're kind of a shortened version of the book. So the book is going to give you much more detail, but the PowerPoints are also there. Okay, and today I'm going to start with mathematics and finance. And we have two sets of homework due on mathematics and finance on the 29th. So that's 5 days from now. So we have our regular class on Monday, where we'll cover the second one here. Today we're going to at least cover simple interest. So you have two, simple interest and compound interest. Okay, so we're going to start that today. We're going to have a little short quiz on Khan Academy as well, but I think I want to make sure everybody's logged in before I start that. So I'll just talk about this a little bit before we start the quiz. Okay, so we're talking about simple interest, and so let's say, first of all, what does the word interest mean? So maybe we should look it up in Google. Let's see what happens. We check what interest means. Let's try this. So interest. So here's one meaning, and actually this is the meaning that we want. This isn't probably not the meaning that we want. So this is if we talk about some subject as being interesting, that's a different use of the word interest. But we're talking about probably what they're talking about here, which is has to do with borrowing or lending money. So that's what we're talking about. So suppose that, for example, we take $10,000 and we put it into the bank. So, anybody know any example interest rates that are available right now? Anybody have any? Like, it depends on the country, it depends on the year. Like, is it now or is it 20 years ago? Let's look at interest rates over time in the US just to see what happens. Okay, so this is 1971 to 2016. Let's see what that looks like. So this is just short time period, and we can see that there was a jump in the interest rate, but it's not, these numbers are not really much different. This is 0.025 and this is 0.5. But anyway, there was a big jump. But let's get a much longer time frame. Let's look at 10 years. Okay. Yeah, let's even look at that. What's this look like? Okay. So you can see that interest rates, and I can't believe this is true. Really? 20%? Wow, look at that. Look at that on the left. Is that really true? Anyway, you can see that according to this, if we're reading it correctly, interest rates in 1980 in the United States were 20%. I they're changing all the time, and now they're close to zero. Okay, so what is that? What are we talking about? Interest. What is interest? What does this mean? I guess we should have said that first. But anyway, what is interest means what? Interest, we can see that interest rates change. At least you can see that from this chart, even if we don't know what it is. So what is interest? Well, let's suppose that the interest rate was equal to, and this is very high as you can see, according to that chart, but let's suppose that it was 12%. So right now it's only like 0.5%, okay? But let's suppose that it was 12% just for sake of calculations. Okay? So suppose that's true, and suppose you put this money in the bank, $10,000, and you leave it in there for a year. So first of all, what is 12% of $10,000? Well, let's do it easier. What's 10% of $10,000? So that means 1/10 of $10,000. So how much is that? That's $1,000. So what would 12% be? 1,200. So let's just write that down. 12% of 10,000 equals 1,200, right? Okay, everyone agree with that? Okay, so with that fact, if I tell you that the bank is giving you 12% interest per year, then if you put in $10,000 in the bank, how much interest would you get at the end of the year? So let's say you put it in at January 1st, 2016, and then at the end of this year, December 31st, the bank would give you what? $1,200, right? Or 12% of 10,000, right? Okay? And of course they also have to give you the $10,000 back as well, right? They can't keep that, right? You didn't give them $10,000 for a gift, right? So they'd have to give you the $10,000 plus the $1,200, right? So how much money would you have then at December 31st? How much would you have? You'd have 10,000, because that's what you started with that, plus 1,200, which is equal to what? Okay, so you'd have that. Okay, everyone agree with that? So that's what 12% interest would give you after a year. Okay, now suppose you put it in for another year, another $10,000 in, or I'm sorry, you left the $10,000 in the bank. Then at the end of the next year, how much interest would you get from the bank? You get another $1,200, right? Okay, so how much interest would you have received from the bank in total? 12 plus 12, or $2,400, right? And if you did it for 3 years, it would obviously be what, $3,600? And if you did it for 10 years, it would be what? $12,000, right? Does everyone agree with that? Okay, so everybody knows what we're talking about, right? Okay? Now, so let's say after 10 years, so after 10 years, how much money would you have? You'd have the interest. The interest would be, we just said, is what? $12,000. And then of course you'd have the money that you originally put in the bank. So that would be plus another, we'll call that the money you put in originally, we'll call that the principal. Principal. I think it's that. Or is it L-E? I think it's A-L. Check in a minute. Okay, anyway, that's what? Maybe it's LE, principal. So, what was the principal? The amount that you started with, or the amount that you put into the bank, was 10,000. So you have that also. So how much do you have in total? $22,000, right? 22,000. Okay, does everyone understand the concept? Okay. Now there's there's two scenarios we want to talk about when we talk about this section of our course called Finance, or Mathematics of Finance. And by the way, I forgot one thing. I wanted to mention, and that is not every country has such a system. In some countries, this whole concept is basically illegal. Basically, in which countries? Which ones? In Islamic countries, this is basically illegal. Because in the Quran, I think it says that you're not allowed to lend money and get, the idea is that if you're going to make money, you can't make it with money. You have to make it with your sweat and tears, blood, sweat, and tears. You have to make it with your own work, right? Not because you're rich and you can. So that's kind of the idea behind it. So anyway, whatever the idea is, it's not allowed. Okay? So there is no interest in those kinds. But they have some other systems for doing this, something similar, I guess. But anyway, so actually there's a whole system of study called Islamic Finance, because all of the finance that we study is basically based on this one concept of interest. So if you don't have that, you can't do all the other stuff that they do. So then you need a whole other system organized around a different principle instead of organized around the principle of interest. Okay? But anyway, we're going to study how this works, how interest works. Okay? So we have, anyway, we said after 10 years, we would have 22,000, right? 22,000. So, now there's one other, so that's one scenario. And then there's one other scenario we could consider, and that is, suppose that, after 1 year, what did we say happens after 1 year? You have your $10,000, and then you get the interest, which we said was $1,200. So the total you have is what? 10,000 plus, we already wrote it down. Here, right, we have 11,200, right? Now you could certainly, and this is the second scenario, you could certainly have left this money in the bank, right? You could have left it in the bank instead of like leaving it, taking it out of the bank. You could have said, well, now I'm going to have 11,200 in the bank. So that's going to change everything in terms of our calculations, because now, in the second year, we assumed that you only had $10,000 in the bank, so you got another $1,200 in interest, but now it's not true anymore. Because now, we said, I'll just leave the money in the bank, so now I have this much in the bank for 1 year, right? So I'm going to get not 12% of 10,000, which was 1,200, I'm going to get 12% of this number, which I don't know what that is. Anybody super quick at doing that? No. What? Can you say it louder? 1,344. Now I just want to ask you one thing. Did you do that in your head or on a calculator? Okay, no problem, good. I mean, good or bad, I'm not sure. But anyway, okay, so that's the number in the second year, right? So it's not 1,200 anymore, it's this. So we have to add this in, right? And then the next year, what? So in the next year we're going to have, in the second year we had this much money in the bank, so we got this much interest. So in the third year, we're going to have whatever this is in the bank. So we're going to get another calculation, right? And it's going to keep being messy like this, right? We still could ask, what? What is it worth in 10 years? Well, how much are we going to have in 10 years? Right? So that's a slightly different calculation. I mean, that is a different calculation, right? We're not going to end up with the same number, right? So if we do it this way, is that going to be greater than or less than if we do it this way? Which one is going to end up being bigger? The one on the left, right? This way is going to get, and we're going to end up having more because we're getting interest on our interest. Right? We're getting interest on our interest, right? So that's a different scenario, right? It's not the same as the other first scenario. So that is called compound interest. The first scenario we're going to call simple interest. Okay, so the first one is easier to calculate, and I don't think anybody has the answer for the second one immediately. Right? I mean, you could figure it out because you could do it step by step. You'd have to do 10 calculations. You can get the answer. You would know the answer. But it's not the same calculation as this one. And this one is simple to do, or relatively simple to do. Okay, so this one is called simple interest, and this is called compounded. We want to do both. We want to study both. Because both are available. Banks use both. And if you want to be talking to banks, you need to understand what they're doing, so you need to understand both of them. Okay? So, compound means like putting things together. So you can see why it's called compound, because we're putting the interest in, and then doing the interest on that, and then putting the interest in again, and doing the interest on that. So that's compound interest. Okay? So we need to study both now, of course. Probably better to study the easier one first, and then the harder one, rather than do it the other way around. So let's take this short quiz now, and then we'll study simple interest today and compound interest next time. So let me just give me a minute to set it up, and then you can do it.